The Buried Giant, Chapter 8. The young monk was a thin, sickly-looking Pict, who spoke Edwin's language well. No doubt he had been delighted to have in his company someone near his own age, and for the first part of the journey, down through the dawn mist, he had talked with relish. But since entering the trees, the young monk had fallen silent, and Edwin now wondered if he had in some way offended his guide. More likely the monk was simply anxious not to attract the attention of whatever lurked in these woods, amidst the pleasant-looking birdsong. There had been some strange hissings and murmurs. When Edwin had asked once again, more from a wish to break the silence than for reassurance, "So my brother's wounds seem not to be mortal?" the reply had been almost curt. "Father Jonas says not. There's none wiser." Wystan, then, could not be so badly hurt. Indeed, he must have managed this same journey down the hill not long ago, and while it was still dark. Had he had to lean heavily on the arm of his guide, or had he managed to go mounted on his mare, perhaps with a monk holding steady the bridle? "Show this boy down to the copper's cottage, and take care no one sees you leave the monastery." Such, according to the young monk, had been Father Jonas's instruction to him. So Edwin would soon be reunited with the warrior. But what sort of welcome could he expect? He had let Wystan down in the first challenge. Instead of hurrying to his side at the first sign of battle, Edwin had hurried off into the long tunnel. But his mother had not been down there, and only when the tunnel's end had finally appeared, distant and moon-like in the blackness, had he felt lifting from him the heavy clouds of dream and realized with horror what had occurred. At least he had done his utmost once he had emerged into the chilly morning air. He had run almost the whole way back up to the monastery, slowing only for the steepest slopes, sometimes pushing through the woods. He had felt himself lost, but then the trees had thinned and the monastery had appeared against the pale sky. So he had gone on climbing and arrived at the big gate, breathless and with his legs aching. The small door beside the main gate was unlocked, and he had managed to collect himself sufficiently to enter the grounds with stealthy care. He had been aware of smoke for the latter part of his climb, but now it tickled his chest, making it hard not to cough loudly. He knew then for sure it was too late to move the hay wagon, and felt a great emptiness opening within him. But he had pushed the feeling aside for another moment and pressed on into the grounds. For some time he came across neither monk nor soldier, but as he moved along the high wall, ducking his head so as not to be spotted from some far-off window, he had seen below the soldiers' horses crowded together in the small yard inside the main gate. Bound on all sides by high walls, the animals, still saddled, were circling nervously, even though there were scarcely space to do so without colliding. Then, as he came towards the monk's quarters, where another of his age might well have rushed on to the central courtyard, he had had the presence of mind to recall the geography of the grounds and proceed with a roundabout route, utilizing what he remembered of the back ways. Even on reaching his destination, he had placed himself behind a stone pillar and peered around cautiously. The central courtyard was barely recognizable. 3 robed figures were sweeping wearily as he had watched. A fourth arrived with a pail and tossed water across the cobbles, setting to flight several lurking crows. The ground was strewn in places with straw and with sand, and his eyes were drawn to the several shapes covered over with sackcloth, which he supposed to be corpses. The old stone tower where he knew Wystan had held out loomed over the scene, but this too had changed. It was charred and blackened in many places, especially around its arched entryway, and each in its narrow windows. To Edwin's eyes, the tower as a whole appeared to have shrunk. He had been craning his neck around the pillar to ascertain if the pools surrounding the covered shapes were of blood or of water, when the bony hands he had grasped his shoulders from behind. He had twisted around to find Father Ninian, the silent monk, staring into his eyes. Edwin had not cried out, but he had said, in a low voice, pointing towards the bodies, "Master Wystan, my Saxon brother, does he lie there?" The silent monk appeared to understand and shook his head emphatically. But even as he raised a finger to his lips in the familiar manner, he had stared warningly into Edwin's face. Then, glancing furtively around him, Ninian had tugged Edwin away from the courtyard. "Can we be certain, warrior," he had asked Wystan the day before, "the soldiers will really come? Who'll tell them we're here? Surely these monks believe us to be simple shepherds." "Who knows, boy? Perhaps we'll be left in peace, but there's one I fancy may betray our presence here, and even now the good Brennus may be issuing his orders. Test it well, young comrade. Britons have a way of dividing a bale from within with wooden slats. We needed pure hay all the way down. He and Whiston had been in the barn behind the old tower. Having for the moment done with woodcutting, the warrior had been seized by the urge to load the rickety wagon high with the hay stored at the back of the shed. As they had set about this task, Edwin had been required at regular intervals to clamber onto the bales and prod them with the stick. The warrior, observing carefully from the ground, would sometimes make him go over a section again, or order him to thrust a leg as far down as possible into a particular spot. These holy men are just the sort to get absent-minded, Whiston had said by the way of explanation. They may have left a spade or pitchfork in the hay. If so, it would be a service to retrieve it for them, tools being scarce up here. Although at that point the warrior had given no hint as to the purpose of the hay, Edwin had known straight away that it had to do with the confrontation ahead, and that was why, as the bales had piled up, he had asked his questions about the soldiers. "Who will betray us, warrior? The monks don't suspect us. They're so concerned with their holy quarrels, they hardly glance our way." "Maybe so, boy, but test there too, just there. Can it be, warrior, it's the old couple who will betray us? Surely they're too foolish and honest." "They may be Britons, but I don't fear their treachery. Yet you'd be wrong to suppose them foolish, boy. Master Axel, for one, is a deep fellow." Warrior, why do we travel with them? They slow us at every turn." "They slow us right enough, and we'll part ways soon. Yet this morning as we set off, I felt eager for Master Axel's company, and I may wish for more of it yet. As I say, he's a deep one. He and I may have a little more to discuss. But just now, let's concentrate on what faces us here. We must load this wagon in a sure and steady way. We need pure hay, no wood or iron there. See how I depend on you, boy?" But Edwin had let him down. How could he have gone on sleeping for so long? It had been a mistake to lie down at all. He should simply have sat upright in the corner, napping a few winks the way he had seen Whiston do, ready at the first noise to start to his feet. Instead, like an infant, he had accepted from the old woman a cup of milk and had fallen into a deep sleep in his corner of the chamber. Had his real mother called him in his dreams? Perhaps that was why he remained asleep for so long, and why, when he had been shaken awake by the crippled monk, instead of rushing to the warrior's side, he had followed after the others down into the long, strange tunnel, for all the world as if he were still in the depths of dreaming. It had been his mother's voice without doubt, the same voice that had called to him in the barn. "Find the strength for me, Edwin. Find the strength and come rescue me. Come rescue me. Come rescue me." There had been an urgency there that he had not heard the previous morning, and there had been more. As he stood at that open trap door, staring down into the steps leading into the darkness, he had felt something pull at him with such force that he had become giddy, almost sick. The young monk was holding back Blackthorn with a stick, waiting for Edwin to go ahead of him. Now at last he spoke, though in a hushed whisper. "A shortcut. We'll soon see the roof of the copper's cottage." As they came out of the wood to where the land swept down into the receding mist, Edwin could still hear the movement and hissing in the nearby bracken, and he thought of the sunny evening towards the end of summer when he had talked with the girl. He had not at first seen the pond that day, for it had been small and well hidden by rushes. A cloud of brightly colored insects had flown up before him, an event normally to draw his attention, but on this occasion he had been too preoccupied by the noise coming from the water's edge. An animal in a trap? There it was again, behind the birdsong and the wind. The noise followed a pattern, an intense burst of rustling as of a struggle, then silence, then soon more rustling. Approaching cautiously, he had heard labored breathing. Then the girl had been before him. She was lying on her back in the rough grass, her torso twisted to one side. She was a few years older than him, 15 or 16, and her eyes were fixed on him without fear. It took a while to realize her odd posture had to do with her hands being tied behind her body. They flattened the grass around her, marked the area where, by pushing with her legs, she had been sliding about in her struggles. Her cloth smock tied at the waist was discolored, perhaps soaked. All along one side and both legs, unusually dark-skinned, bore fresh scratches from the thistles. It occurred to him that she was an apparition or a sprite, but when she spoke, her voice had no echo to it. "What do you want? Why have you come?" Recovering himself, Edwin said, "If you like, I could help you. These knots aren't difficult, they just tied me more tightly than usual." Only now did he notice her face and neck were covered in perspiration. Even as she spoke, her hands under her back were busily struggling. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "Not hurt, but a beetle landed on my knee just now. It clung on and bit me. There will be a swelling now. I can see you're still too much of a child to help me. It doesn't matter. I'll manage myself." Her gaze remained fixed on him even as her face tightened and she twisted her torso a little way off the ground. He watched transfixed, expecting at any moment to see the hands come out from under her, but she sagged down defeated and lay in the grass, breathing hard and staring angrily at him. "I could help," Edwin said. "I'm good with knots." "You're just a child." "I'm not. I'm nearly 12. "They'll come back soon. If they find you've untied me, they'll beat you." "Are they grown-ups?" "They think they are, but they're just boys. Older than you, though, and there's 3 of them. They like nothing better than to beat you. They'll force your head into that muddy water until you pass out. I've watched them do it before." "Are they from the village?" "The village?" She looked at him with contempt. "Your village? We pass village after village every day. What do we care about your village? They may come back soon, and then you'll be in trouble." "I'm not afraid. I could free you if you like." "I always free myself," she twisted again. "Why did they tie you?" "Why? I suppose so they could watch me try to get free. But they're gone now to steal food." Then she said, "I thought you villagers worked all day. Why does your mother let you wander?" "I'm allowed because I finished 3 corners by myself already today." Then he added, "My real mother's not in the village anymore." "Where's she gone?" "I don't know. She was taken. I live with my aunt now." "When I was a child like you," she said, "I lived in a village. Now I travel." "Who do you travel with?" "Oh, with them. We pass this way quite often. I remember them tying me and leaving me here once before, this very spot last spring." "I'll release you," he said suddenly, "and if they come back, I won't be frightened of them." Yet something still held him back. He had expected her eyes to shift away, or her body at least to accommodate the prospect of his approach, but she had gone on staring at him, while under her arched back her hands continued their struggle. Only when she let out a long sigh did he realize that she had been holding her breath for some time. "I can usually do it," she said. "If you weren't here, I have done it by now." "Do they tie you to stop you running away?" "Run away? Where would I run away?" "I travel with them." Then she said, "Why did you come to me? Why don't you go help your mother instead?" "My mother?" He was genuinely surprised. "Why should my mother want me to help her?" "You said she was taken, didn't you?" "Yes, but that was long ago. She's happy now." "How can she be happy? Don't you think she wants someone to come and help her?" "She's just traveling. She wouldn't want me to." "She didn't want you to come before because you were a child? But you're nearly a man now." She fell silent, arching her back as she made another concerted effort. Then she sagged back down again. "Sometimes," she said, "if they come back and I haven't got myself free, they don't untie me. They watch and don't say a word until I manage by myself and my hands come loose. Until then, they sit there watching and watching, their devil's horns growing between their legs. I'd mind if they spoke, but they stare and stare and stare and don't say anything." Then she said, "When I saw you, I thought you'd do the same. I thought you'd sit and stare and not say a thing." "Shall I untie you? I'm not afraid of them, and I'm good with knots." "You're only a child." Suddenly tears appeared. It happened so quickly, and because her face showed no other signs of emotion, Edwin thought at first that he was watching perspiration. But then he realized that they were tears. And because her face was half upturned, the tears rolled oddly past the bridge of her nose and down the opposite cheek. All the while she held her gaze on him. The tears confused him, making him stop in his tracks. "Come on then," she said, and for the first time moved onto her side, letting her gaze fall away towards the bulrushes in the water. Edwin hurried forward, like a thief spying an opportunity, and crouching in the grass, began to tug at the knots. The twine was thin and coarse, cutting cruelly into her wrists. The palms, in one contrast, spread open one across the other, were small and tender. At first the knots did not yield, but he forced himself to be calm and studied carefully the paths of the coils. Then, when he tried again, a knot gave under his touch. Then now he went about his work more confidently, glancing from time to time at the soft palms, waiting like a pair of docile creatures. After he pulled the twine from her, she turned and sat facing him at what suddenly felt an uncomfortably close distance. She did not, he noticed, smell of stale excrement the way most people did. Her odor was like that of a fire made from damp wood. "If they come," she said quietly, "they'll drag you through the reeds, then half drown you. You'd better go. Go back to your village." She reached out a hand experimentally, as though unsure if even now it was under her control, and pushed his chest. "Go. Hurry." "I'm not afraid of them." "You're not afraid, but they'll still do all these things to you. You help me, but you have to go away now. Go. Hurry." When he returned just before sunset, the grass was still flattened where she had lain, but there were no other traces left of her. All the same, the spot felt almost uncannily tranquil, and he had sat down in the grass for some moments, watching the bulrushes waving in the wind. He never told anyone about the girl, not his aunt, who would quickly have concluded she was a demon, nor any of the other boys, but in the weeks that followed, a vivid image of her had often returned to him unbidden, sometimes at night within his dreams, often in broad daylight as he was digging the ground or helping to mend a roof, and then the devil's horn would grow between his legs. Eventually the horn would go away, leaving him with a feeling of shame, and then the girl's words would return to him. "Why did you come to me? Why don't you go and help your mother instead?" But how could he go to help his mother? The girl herself had said he was only a child. Then again, as she pointed out, he would soon be a man. Whenever he recalled these words, he would feel his shame anew, and yet he had been able to see no way forward.